Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Kelly. I'm the head of advocacy with the NCBI. Over the next few weeks during the coronavirus crisis, we're going to reach out to a number of people who are blind and vision impaired to see how they're coping with our new reality in Ireland and you never know across the world. Of course, check out ncbi.ie or any of our social media channels for all of our new content during this period. Today, we thought we would check in with NCBI board member and Vision Sports board member and Paralympic athlete Jason Smyth. Jason, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good, good. Of course, we're all trying to adapt to the new government restrictions. When you're a professional athlete, that must be quite a challenge.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think it's something I suppose all the athletes are finding somewhat difficult. That we know, obviously, recently we've heard the Olympics and Paralympics are postponed now till 2021. But the reality is the preparation you do now impacts next year. And I suppose the big challenge with it is this isn't 2 or 3 week issue. This can turn into weeks and weeks. So the longer that goes on, the more of an impact it has or can have. So yeah, I think as athletes, depending on what sports you do, you have different challenges. But it's trying to somewhat maintain where you're at and minimize the amount you drop off, which as everybody's experiencing in what the normal used to be. There's certainly challenges around that.
Indeed, there is, Jason, and I suppose in preparing for the interview today, I was kind of thinking and trying to put myself into the shoes of a professional athlete. And for me, one of the biggest adjustments is being in the house a lot more and not having the freedom. That must really be difficult mentally for someone like yourself.
Yeah, it is. And again, for me, so I'm living up north, so I know our restrictions aren't quite as strict. Where I know down south you've got to be within in 2 miles of your house, other than going shopping. So for me, things like gym, um, so the organisation Athletics Northern Ireland up here have given me a bunch of gym equipment like Olympic bars, plates, squat racks. So I've actually got that um, at the house here, using it outside in the back garden. So it's somewhat how you adapt to a gym. I also live within a few miles of a track. So for my once a day exercise, I tend to go to the track on the days that I've got a running session. So for me, I am as much as possible trying to um, maintain what I am doing. Obviously, it's not the same, but I think I'm probably somewhat able to keep things normal compared to other people in other situations, which probably helps in preparation. But I think mentally um, helps to keep things somewhat normal. And again, we all know the benefits that exercise has on the mental side of for everybody's mentality. And I think probably this change of everybody being locked at home actually, in somewhat, if you take the opportunity to exercise and take the opportunity to reevaluate some of the important things in life, there's opportunities in that.
There certainly are. And just taking from what you said there, Jason, up until this point, you would have been going out to do all of your training. So you've readjusted that, doing a lot more at home.
Yeah, I've had no choice. It's as I say, I'm out at the track a few times a week. Other than that, I'm not out at all. Gyms at home. I would have, you look at athletes who would have had a lot of support around um, physio support. We don't have any of access to that. Even gym, strength and conditioning, we would have a coach there that keeps an eye on things. We don't have that. Even when I am out doing some sessions, it's literally just me. So it is very, very much changed. And as I say, I'm literally out to do a few runs. Other than that, like anybody else, out to get food, and really locked down to doing that and that only.
Yeah, and are you able to keep in contact with your coaches and other people involved in maintaining your performance through WhatsApp and other modes of communications?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the obviously great things with technology is the ability to keep and communicate and access anybody. I think the challenge definitely lies in I mean, when you look at sport and people at that level, a lot of it's around feedback. And we're talking about, as athletes, we're working in these small percentages, and those small percentages, a big part of that is feedback and looking at, not just what I see and feel, but what a coach sees and feel, and how that comes together to moving forward and finding those extra percents. And obviously we have challenges around that now, and that's why I said a little earlier, this period for me seems about success is about maintaining where you're at, and minimizing how much you drop off, where normally in any other year, this is a period. I was supposed to be heading to the States today, and preparing for warm weather training and into competition is a period where we're really starting to kick on as we hit the early season. This now turns into a period of maintaining, minimize the drop off, and if things change in a month or two, you're still in touch and distance to be able to go on and perform in the summer. I suppose the other big risk of this period without support then becomes for athletes is also, number one, not training, but number two, getting injured because we don't have the support around us.
Indeed, and I suppose that's a fear that you live with if you pick up a slight tweak in the next couple of weeks, is getting access to the medical care, whether that be physio or a doctor. It must be in the back of your mind quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think like that then impacts on what you do over the next number of weeks and months, because again, at that level, we're trying to get as close to that line at being max or being at 100%, but obviously being close to that line runs a risk of slightly going over it, which means getting injured. And when you consider I have access to treatment that I'm usually getting twice a week, and now all of a sudden you go to 0 per week, and that could turn into I think I haven't had treatment in about 4 weeks, and that could turn into another 48 weeks. So you all of a sudden you could be sitting at going from getting treatment twice a week to getting treatment none in 12 weeks, which is almost a quarter of the year. And that can have a big impact on how athletes prepare. And, it is an interest. This whole year and the year and a half leading up to the games is going to be quite interesting, because there's lots of reasons why athletes can get things wrong by undertraining, because they can't. And for those that do continue to train, then the risk of getting injured increases. So, without doubt, tough times for athletes in preparing for, the Paralympics next year.
Yeah, I think many people who are listening to this piece, before we move on to kind of the Paralympics and your hopes there, is what is an average day for someone like yourself involved when you get up? If you could take us through a typical day in terms of training.
So I generally train 6 days a week, and those days. Some days would be harder days than others. So I tend to work on 2 days hard, an easier day, 2 days hard, an easier day, a day off. And I think one of the important things that people often don't realize is it's not just about what you do training, it's also about how you recover, because how you recover allows you to come back and train at that high intensity. But for me, for example, an average day when we have no coronavirus is I generally head to the Sports Institute up in Belfast. I usually have treatment in the morning, say 10 to 11. That would include a bit of treatment and some yoga and mobility. Then I would have a track session. That could be something like sprinting out of blocks. That probably lasts from about 11 to maybe 1:30. I'd then usually grab lunch for about half an hour to 2. Then I would have gym, so strength and conditioning with abs and core at the end is probably takes me to about 4, maybe half 4, depending on the session. So as you can see right away there, you've got a somewhat of a full day of training, and obviously can be quite tough on the body. And even back to what I was saying about the risks of getting injured when you start looking at the load that you're doing and regularly doing. So yeah, like that's always I find one of the interesting things is people see the Paralympic Games, for example, and you see those 10 seconds if you run down the track and you think, oh, that looks great. But what nobody sees is, the 360 odd days that lead you up to that point where all the work has to go in, where all the sacrifices have to go in. We often see those glory moments and the excitement moments, but usually what happens between now and then is what sets you up to be successful. Yes, in those moments there's a mental aspect of it, but the preparation really is key to set the platform for performing.
I can certainly relate to that. Having played a bit of blind football, it's the dedication and the commitment that is required to get to a certain level that I certainly struggle with. You start off for a period of time, and then life takes over and other interests come in, and the training pattern and everything begins to slip. And I think sometimes, as you say, people take the effort to be involved in high level support for granted, and they don't realize the sacrifices that you have to make along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I suppose, Jason, it's been in the media over the last couple of weeks now, and it was confirmed earlier this week that the Paralympics have been moved to next summer. There was a couple of weeks where there was a lot of uncertainty as to what was going to happen. I know you had already reached your qualifying time for your own discipline. How much of an impact did that uncertainty have on you?
I'd say it didn't have any impact on me. As you say, I had already qualified, so all my preparation is around building for that moment and being ready for August. Obviously, when you look at athletes who were trying to chase a qualification, and I've said this before to other people, is in this moment of uncertainty, if you're where you need to be or ahead of where you need to be, then you're under less pressure when things go wrong, like what is going around or is going on. But when you're trying to chase something or force something, then when things do go wrong, it can be very difficult to deal with. So as I say, I was fortunate enough that I was in that situation. Honestly, when most athletes, when you step back and kind of look at it, you're finding it harder and harder to believe that the games are going to happen in the summer. When I knew of other sports that this whole year that athletes were supposed to be qualifying for games or the games that competitions were just being cancelled everywhere. So you kind of knew that something was going to happen, but you kind of just also have to keep ticking away and preparing that nothing is changing. And to be honest, even the games have changed. It's not really changing the way I'm going to prepare this year either, because I'm going to still prepare to run fast in the summer, because again, when we step back another year, what happens this year sets the foundations for performing next year. So I think that the also risk of the games being cancelled means people think, we can ease off, we can, take it easier a little bit now because we're not under pressure to hit a standard, hit a qualification in the summer. But this sets the foundation for next year. When we talk about a quarter of this year could be lost, that is quite a big impact. And, let's be honest, we have no guarantee that in 6 months that we don't see more issues around this as well. So for me, it's continuing to try prepare as normal as possible, regardless of the situation, which is easier said than done.
It certainly is, Jason. And at this juncture, do you know, or is it still to be worked out? Will your qualification time stand, or will you have to re-qualify?
At this stage, I don't know. I think obviously with them just getting dates for the games is probably where their priority was, and I'd say over the next weeks and months we'll start to hear and see what the qualification process now is. If you're going to ask I would assume they will probably just somewhat forget about this year. So I still think qualifying last year at World Championships will probably still be fine for next year. So I think for those who've qualified, I think you're not going to be in much a different situation. I think the issue still lays for those who haven't qualified, and now what the qualification process starts to look like, which again becomes a little bit harder for people to prepare because it's an unknown. Where for me, if I'm just looking at the game starting at the end of August, that's just simply what I'm preparing for.
Yeah, and Jason, I was reading another article that you did in recent days for News Talk, and you were talking about being a year older. And is that something that's also at the back of your mind as well? Because you are quite an experienced athlete and have been to Paralympics before.
Yeah, it's something as I get towards the end of my career. That I've always, well, when we look at any sport or anything, the first thing to go as people get older is speed. So the reality is if I lose speed, I'm in a bit of trouble. So, I always knew heading into Tokyo, I would be, I think, well, as athletes, we're always looking at Olympic and Paralympic cycles because that's the main thing. So I always knew Tokyo would be, let's get to Tokyo and start looking beyond. Is another 4-year cycle realistic? I'm 32 in July, so you're talking, I'd be 36. Actually, maybe this sounds silly now. I'm 33 in July or 32 in July. I can't remember. It all seems to mush into the same. So 36. So by the time the next games is 36, 37. So, you generally look at sport and people are past their peak. So, yeah, I nearly always had thought I'll get to Tokyo, see where I'm at. The faster I run by Tokyo increases the likelihood of another 4 years. But realistically, I may have to look at, smaller steps like 1 or 2 years. So it does change things and it doesn't. I mean, I don't think another year heading to Tokyo next year will make a huge impact. Honestly, I'm in really good shape this year, probably the best shape I've been in quite a while. So that sets, puts me in good place looking into next year and possibly looking at beyond. But as I say, it becomes less of a looking 4 years down the line and starting to look at smaller time periods. But I mean, there's this balance too, because I mean, I've obviously been very fortunate to being very successful, and you also want to pick the right time to get out and leave. Often in sport, we continue to, there's one more year and there's one more year. And then you start to see people slowly drift away and performances drop. So I'd also like to get the timing of it right, of getting out at a high place. Again, very easy said and hard to do. So there's a balance of that and the uncertainty of what my next step in I suppose my career is going to be beyond sport.
Great, Jason. I found the conversation with you today really interesting, and I'm sure people who are listening will too. Just before we wrap up, two very kind of quick questions that I would like to cover. I mentioned at the outset that you are board director of NCBI, and as people will now know, Vision Sports is now part of the NCBI family, and I know Vision Sports is an organisation that is very close to your own heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first got involved in sport and into para sport back in 2005, would have been down, would have came through the lines of which was then Irish Blind Sports, now Vision Sports. So yeah, for me, that's where I suppose those first steps into my whole journey within Paralympics and the success I've had. So yeah, absolutely. Close to my heart. And I think for me, probably one of the things that this whole journey in sport, I think I've learned a lot. It's very much made me who I am, and I see the benefits of, from my own experience, the benefits sport can have, and maybe sport at that level, but sport at all levels, just exercise and being fit and healthy. We look at physical, mental, social, there's so many positive impacts, and sport has given me so much. And I think for me, I kind of want or hope other people will see what sport can bring them, and the power that can do in changing people's lives. And for me, trying to use my platform to try give people similar opportunities.
Great. And finally, I suppose, have you any kind of hints and tips for people who want to stay somewhat active, and simple things that they could do at home?
Yeah, I think it all depends on what you like doing. I think for me, when I think of exercising, and I know a lot of people look at it and also don't enjoy it, but it's trying to find what you enjoy within it. For example, people say I don't like going for long runs, and neither do I, and I don't. But there's a way around that. Is in a sprinter does short runs, faster, shorter recovery. So being locked down to your house obviously is a bit more restricted, but when you the reality is, with what we kind of talked about earlier with technology, is you can access any information, and the information, and I don't know any specific stuff, but are out there for following along on workouts. It can be stuff to do with boxing, it can be stuff to do with running, it can be stuff to do with just gym exercises. So I think the important thing is to find what you enjoy, and to try different things, and make the most of the opportunity and the time we have to do something, and make positive changes. I think the important thing is not just looking at these changes now, but making lifestyle changes that are something that are ongoing and for the future.
Yeah, I think that's very sage advice, Jason. And I know that Vision Sports, in conjunction with some NCBI staff, are developing a number of indoor workouts that we'll be pushing out across our website and social media. So I think people will be able to utilize those in the days and weeks ahead. Finally, I just want to thank you for your time today, Jason.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Great. That was myself, Kevin Kelly, in conversation with Jason Smyth, Paralympic athlete and NCBI and Vision Sports board director. Stay tuned to our Facebook and our other social media platforms over the coming days and weeks for further interviews with people who are blind and vision impaired at this very uncertain time.